Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Thanks so much for coming to join me today. I want to share a fun project with you. I work part-time at Goodwill, gotta make ends meet just like everybody, and the good thing about that is I'm constantly seeing some really cool stuff that we can renew, give it a little bit of a makeover and utilize it, right? So definitely I am limited in counter space, and to have a nice dish with all my spoons in it or something. So when I found this, I thought this would look great on the side of my baker's cabinet that I have beside my stove, and if I need a spoon, then it'll be really easy for me to reach over and grab one out of my little stand here that I found that I want to give a little bit of a different look. Right, so I found it in this mossy green color, and that's not a big deal because I can change the handle color to something that matches my kitchen a little bit more. I use mostly peacock blue and aquas in my kitchen, so definitely want to give this a little bit of a makeover and have these spoons pop out nicely and definitely change the background. Okay, so I still want to be able to use these spoons, definitely. We're going to treat them a little bit differently on this side. I'll show you guys later in the process. And definitely we can still repaint our handles. So it looks like maybe somebody might have done this before. I'm not sure. It's a little bit bumpy and lumpy. So we're definitely going to get some sandpaper out, get this guy all cleaned up, and give it a new look. Okay, so there's lots of different sandpaper out there, guys. I have a palm sander, definitely. Some of these sheets, sometimes I still use them just with my hand if I needed to. And they come in different grits as well. So I just got the 120 here, a little bit softer. It's not so coarse, like a medium grit. And then you can also get them in different blocks. And I like the ones with the angle on them. Right, so then that way when you want to get into these corners, it definitely helps you, and it's got the nice soft sponge on there. So that's definitely something that you can pick up at any hardware store. But I'm a retired nail tech, if you've seen some of my other videos, and I definitely like using up some of my old files too. So they work pretty good. Alright, so there's a bit of a scuff here happening over here that's really kind of chewed out, and this is the only area that I'm really worried about, guys. Right, so if there's any really deep areas of wood missing or anything, you could always pop in a little bit of a wood filler. Okay, but definitely this piece doesn't need much, right? That's all it needed, was a little bit of smoothing there. And then definitely if you want to just use a soft buffer, just to take the shine off. That's all you have to do, is take the shine off. Right? Give it a little bit of a buff, smooth it off. Right? So we're going to use some chalk paint on this, guys, and definitely it covers anything. But if it's not smooth and you just want to kind of smooth it over if there's any bumps or lumps from the previous paint job, you know, definitely that's all I'm really doing. It's not a heavy-duty sanding job that I need to do on these pieces. Okay, so this has been used a few times, so definitely it's a lot softer, and that's all we need to do for prepping. Okay, so I do want to kind of go and file maybe a little bit more on the wood. Right, so clean it up a little bit. Maybe it was stained a bit from cooking, I'm not sure, but that just makes them look all more unique and rustic. Right, so just a little bit of a sand. And like I said, I like the sandpaper sheets that you can get too, because sometimes you can just bend them how you need them. Alright, so I'm definitely going to take off any oldness. Maybe it's gone yellow from being old, and just brighten them up a bit. Okay, so again, I can stick my finger in the sheet, especially for the spoon. Okay, so just a little bit of a freshening up. find a clean spot. See if we can bend this a little bit. Get these sides a little bit. And that's good. Okay. So we just need a damp rag. Okay, and dip some of that in some water. A little bit of soap. You know, just dish soap in the water is good to have just to get a little bit of a degreaser. Right, rinse it all down. Okay, I'm not gonna bother with the back too much, but we'll just give it a quick coat. It looks like a little bit of nail mark there to hold this piece on. Okay, so just, like I said, a little bit of a soapy water mixture that I've got in a bowl here, and just to give it a bit of a rinse and degreasing, just in case. The oils, get rid of that dust, let it dry, and then we're ready for paint. Okay, so I've got some chalk paint here that I used before, and what I've done is put a little bit of saran wrap around the top of them to help them stay nice and fresh, and because this paint does dry out a little bit longer, you can't really hoard too many. But I definitely have a couple different blues to choose from. Right, so definitely this one's a little bit more teal. I think I want to go a little bit more nautical and maybe a tranquil tide mixed together. Okay, so I'm going to definitely play around with at least two colors. Okay, so I can open them up. And chalk paint definitely needs a bit of a stir sometimes. Okay, so we've got that. And take off that film. A little bit of the paper that I didn't get all off. And then I'm going to use one of the small brushes from our plaid big brush line. Okay. And I'm also going to use like a coffee stir stick or a popsicle stick or whatever you got. Give this a good stir. You can see that there's a bit of a liquid. And you really shouldn't shake these too much. You should definitely stir them, right? You want to make sure that you're getting all that thick paint that might be settling at the bottom. And that's working good. Okay, just definitely want it to be painted good. Okay, so once we have that done, we can get our plate out. And I can use this stick just to pull some out. We don't really need a lot for this project, guys. I would definitely, you know, rather pull a little bit more out if I need more. Okay, so we're gonna use that. Wipe off my stick a bit. And then give my nautical blue a good stir. And so you choose any colors you like. Definitely I like to try to stay a little bit darker, right? So you can use like a dark brown, dark blue, dark green. You know, usually some of the softer tones is good. Black would be a little bit too hard. Okay, so I'm going to pull out a bit more blue than the light blue. Okay, so that's a good dollop there. And we'll just leave that stick in there if I need a bit more. Okay. I'm going to start off with the lighter color, because the darker color will always take over your brush, and it's always easier to go a little bit darker and darker at a time. Okay, so again, I want to add some lighter areas. And we have another little sharp piece there I obviously didn't see in my sanding job. Oh, I'm just going to give that a buff. There we go. Alright, so add that lighter color. Okay, here and there. And then we just wipe off our brush and the excess and start coming into the blue colors. Alright, so I definitely just want it to merge into the light. You're not going to see a lot of this, guys. You don't have to worry about being neat about it. Right. I got some little wooden knobby things that I'm going to paint too and show you guys that you can cover your screw. I'm going to go around the outside here. Oops. Just get around my edges. I'll let this dry really good, and then I might go and put a coat on the back. But just worried about the front right now. And give this all a good coat. Okay. Depending on how you feel, you might want to go over and give it a second coat if you like. But usually, chalk paint is wonderful for covering in one coat. And we're definitely going to be putting another coat of antique white over this all. I just wanted to see, you know, play around with some different colors that might pop out. It doesn't really matter in here, it's going to be hidden by one of those little knobby things. Get some really dark blue areas. So you don't see any wood. Right, so I'm trying to get up underneath the bottom area here and get the coverage we need in the wood. Right, get those little circles done. Alright, I do want to pick up some more light now. Very lightly streak that in there. just to give it some different tone. Just quick flat. Alright, you play with it so you're happy. And like I said, not a lot of this is going to show anyways. I just thought, let's see if we can get some lighter tones in there. Nice. Bring a little bit of that down. Okay, and that's going to make a great background for our aging process. Okay, we'll put the brush in some water until I can get over to the sink and give it a proper wash. Okay, and then I'm going to get some new cellophane and rewrap the tops of my paints. And so I usually just put it right on top there. Give it a light little screw. Oops, getting paint all over me here, guys. I could have pre-cut a little piece, but you could also just cut off the excess. Alright, and that'll help to keep any air from coming inside. So we still need a little bit more paint to do the back. I'm just letting this dry really good. Could brush it along a little bit. Oops. Use your fingers. Okay, so that'll definitely give it a good quick start on it there. I'm not worried about these light pieces here at all. They kind of look pretty cool. Could leave it as is too if you really like it dark. Alright, so while that's drying, I want to come and grab a little bit of this blue and paint my handles. So I'm just following the old line that they had. Put a little bit of masking tape around the edge if you really want to. Give it a new look. And try to be creative here. I just found something to kind of rest this up and let it dry. My fingers are dirty, but make sure they're dry and you'll be fine. Really quick and easy upgrade. Okay. 3 corners here that I can rest that in. And if you can, just buy these colors in 2-ounce bottles if you have small projects, because they are available sometimes in different sizes. I think there's 3 different sizes that you can get chalk paint in. 8-ounce, 16-ounce, and 2 ounces. So you really don't need a lot. I would just invest in maybe a few dark colors that you want to play with. And you, like I said, you can still play around with multi-surface on top of this. And see how that looks, and we need another little coat. Then you can always go over this again. Alright, so there's my spoons setting aside. Right, if you see any areas that you feel like you want to go over, you can always do that. Make sure you didn't get your fingers in any of the sides. In those cracks a little bit more. Check, make sure my little circles aren't glooping with too much paint. And so it's not really a second coat, it's just a see what I missed coat. Alright, doesn't need as thick of a coat. Trying to keep some of those lighter areas. Touch up. Especially in the little seams of the pieces there. Alright, so that's looking good. And I'm going to let this dry for a good half an hour. Okay, get this paint covered. Kind of dry. Okay, so I have my brush in the water here. So I just want to get that water out. And we'll give this a quick coat on the back. Yeah. Okay, everything's all nice and dry. I cleaned everything up. My brushes are all clean again. Got all that blue out of there. And definitely we're ready to have some fun here. If you notice, I have a nice candle here. We've played around with different ways of doing this through the time, but I thought, I've had some hard candles, and I've had some problems with cheaper candles and some that are a little bit more softer and flexible. And I was burning a candle here this afternoon, and I just thought, well, what better way of doing this than get it on a little bit more liquidy instead of using it just to draw on, right? And then you're just getting a totally different look. Okay, so I'm not saying it's a right or wrong way. I just want to be a little bit more specific and get it on where I want, and definitely a little bit more localized. So you definitely want a good old brush, one that's definitely lost its chisel. Maybe through the Donna Dewberry practices, you definitely have some old ones in your jar of brushes. Hopefully you, or get just a used old brush. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into this nice wet soft candle wax, right, and I'm going to drip it in places over the edge a little bit, right, and it's going to start to harden and soften as soon as it gets to the cold air, right, and it's going to give you a really nice thick layer of protection, right? So there's some areas that we want to have a little bit heavier than others, bigger, smaller, and looking like it's kind of dripped. All right. So remember, these guys are going to sit in front of it, right? So look how nice that wood color pops up compared to the blue there. Right, I'm almost tempted to keep it dark, but we're going to be lightening this up, right? Cottage style. So I definitely want to have some areas that are kind of chippy from the bottom and the top. Right, just a little small area here. Right, maybe a few areas over here. So pros and cons, like I said, if you just took a candle and rubbed it all over the place, you might end up covering too much. And then it is a very light film. So this is where I thought, let's get some of this nice hot wax and paint it on where we want it. Okay, so this is a little bit different look than we're used to. Right. Again, I want it to be cracked a little bit from the bottom here. Right, just some brush strokes in places. In some areas I was just dripping it on, very, very like a drizzle. Right, effect. I wanted to get it a little bit Not too spooky looking, kind of just good areas that it's going to protect the blue colors that we made, right? And I definitely want to have a good spot here in this light area. And maybe in the high traffic areas, right? Especially. Who thought, eh? We're going to be painting with some candle wax today. Just random spots around the side. And I love the chalk paint because then you can actually see where it's shiny still is where you're getting your coverage. Okay, so maybe a little bit more off the back. Okay. That is my top look. A little bit there and there. Okay, so that's looking good. And we can let this get really good and cool. Hopefully your room is not too hot. Okay, so I'm just getting the excess candle wax off my brush. Right, let that cool. You can wash it with soap and water. It might get, most of it out, but it'll probably still be too greasy to be able to paint with, guys. So hopefully you've picked an old brush that you can just throw in the garbage. Right, go to the dollar store, get a bunch of cheap brushes that are just one-time use, right, for this kind of stuff, especially with the candle wax. Right, so we don't want to disturb this much because you could go and knock it off or scratch it with your hand or finger. So we're just going to let this cool off here very gently. You can see that this is starting to change to a harder texture now. Okay, so I want to keep these handles nice and blue, and I'll probably put another coat on them a little bit later. It's a little bit greasy. Okay, so let's get this candle out of the way. Alright, so I'm going to get some multi-surface or folk art colors, whatever you have, for a little bit of a brown. And we're going to cover this. So I don't want this to be too white. If you have antique white, you can use that too. A little bit softer. And what I want to do is dirty it a little bit with a bit of brown, any brown, burnt umber, true brown. Okay, so we really don't need a lot of that. And then my brush has been dampened because I've already washed it. And I even squish these guys too when I'm letting them dry, make sure, because they'll sometimes will, dry in different weird ways. But it's still damp a little bit, but not too wet, which is what I really like. Okay, so what I like to do too sometimes is try to start off on these difficult edges first. Get them done. Okay, so I'm loading my brush really good with wicker white, and then I'm just going to smear it on the side every once in a while and pick up some of that darted brown colors. Okay, so I want to just smear this paint on very lightly. I don't want to do a lot of heavy back and forth, but I do want good coverage. And don't worry about it because they're all, wherever that wax is going to protect it. Okay, so we're just gonna plop this on pretty heavy. Alright, trying to get in those corners, but don't worry. Some of that blue can definitely show through like a drier stroke. Right, but we definitely want some nice heavy areas and some nice clean white areas. So I'm going to try to go in one direction off the bottom. Right, top to bottom. Try to get all around the top done here. Get that sides done a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to go and hit the bottom area. Right, so see how these little streaks of brown are just showing through, just to make it look a little bit aged. Right, we don't want it to be too worked in. Just enough for a streaky look. And we don't want to disturb this candle wax too much either, so this is what is good, because you're just trying to get that nice coverage. I played around with my lighting for you there a little bit, just because it was definitely too bright for this light. Okay, so again, just try to work myself down. And I'm just going to go right over those holes very lightly so it still stays dark blue in there. Right. And if you feel like this is too dark, you know, you can definitely let this dry and hit it over a little bit with some more white in spots. Okay. Nobody really sees the bottom. But don't worry about 100% coverage, guys, because definitely you want to keep some of that blue. Get it in those corners. Look up. Okay. You can still see the chunkiness from the candle wax, so don't worry about that, guys. Just keep painting over it. And you could do the back too if you like. Or just touch it up around the edges a little bit and do another coat of blue. And then we're going to add a sealer. Okay. And while we're talking about sealers, you could use any sealer. It's indoor use only, right? So definitely Plaid makes a nice outdoor one. And I like using that one on anything, just that way if I need to dust this and clean it one day, then at least it's a little bit more durable for washing. Right, but the multi-surface definitely gives it a nice seal as well. And you don't even have to seal it if you don't want to. Right, so that's why I like using the multi-surface paints. Okay, and I'll let this dry, and then we'll come back and give it a bit of a sanding. Okay, so again, just pick up some fresh white, really skimp it over any areas you don't like or want a little bit more coverage. Right, just lay it very fast and skimp it. Oops, you're picking up some of that candle maybe, drippings. Alright. And then another idea what you can do as well is sprinkle a little bit of coarse salt in while it's wet, just in some spots. Right? And I don't have any coarse salt, so I was like, oh, what's in my pantry? I have a little bit of dried onions. Right? And we could have mixed some of that into our paint too. And well, it's really good and wet. Right? Just got a little bit more paint here. Give it a bit of a coverage. And let that dry. Hey guys, so I did forget about my little knobby things. Okay, so after you put your screw in here, you can get these little covers for this particular piece anyways. I'm not sure what you guys are working on today, but definitely instead of trying to hold on to them, we can paint them while they're in here and then pop them out. Right, so we just gotta kind of catch up a little bit on these guys and add a little bit more glue to it. Okay, you can let that dry, pop them out, try to get around the edges a little bit more, but you're going to hammer them in a little bit more. So they should be kind of flush. Alright, so I'm getting a little bit of paint on my board here, that's okay. And lift up the edges. Because I want to hit it with that white as well. And if you wanted, you can keep these blue if you really wanted to. Hold on to them and try to paint them. Okay, and that won't take too long to dry. And then what I want to do is grab another brush here. Put my plastic back on. And add some fresh white, okay? So it's starting to dry. It's pretty sticky. Some areas are pretty thick, right? So definitely I want to go over this now that the salt and my spices, or whatever you have that's crunchy, right? The dried garlic, the dried onion definitely worked pretty good. So now it won't move around, right? So I want to just hit it with some fresher white, and you can almost see where the candle was. It's already started to do like a crackle effect. So try not to go over it too much. Right, I just want to clean up this blue here a little bit. Right, add a little bit more white if you feel like it's too dark. Just lightly, so you're not moving any of these spices that I've dried. Okay, so a lot of these old items look like they've been painted over a couple times. Oh, let's freshen it up with a new coat of paint. And maybe there's different layers of paint, right? Coming through. They changed their mind and did it blue, and then now they're painted it white. So now some of this blue paint is coming through. Okay, so I'm just kind of cleaning it up a little bit here. And not disturbing my candle. Right, it's still all under there, guys. Okay, so try this button. Okay, so now that it's nice and dry, we can go over it with a little bit more white. And make it match the rest of our design. Right? I'll sprinkle just a little bit more salt. See if I can get a couple grains of this flake stuck there. Right, make sure it's wet. Just a couple would be good if it stayed on. I'm gonna put a little bit of candle wax on there too. Stay there. Let's see what we can do. So we'll be sanding this a little bit too, aging it. All right. Let's see if we can get some blue. Showing up from that. Alright, if you have coarse salts or sugar, then definitely that would be great to use. But in a pinch, I don't have any, so I'm just trying to improvise a little bit. Okay, so definitely we gotta let this dry really good. And even overnight, guys, and then come back in the next morning. Alright, here comes the fun part. Any kind of scraper will do. You can get it at the hardware store, but this is one of the larger ones of the sets that we can get at Donna Dewberry. And you gotta make sure this is really good and dry, guys. If there's any wet paint underneath, it's definitely gonna smear on top of your blue. Right? So we want to use this scraper to scrape off any of that candle wax and all that salt. Okay, so just take your time and work at it. trying to do it straight for you underneath the camera here. And then we can also use a sandpaper a little bit too to give it the smooth surface. Okay, but right now we're just kind of scraping off all of that salt. You can see where I put those drippy marks. Worked it out pretty good. Alright, we'll turn this around so then that way it's easier for me. And I'm even seeing some of the original wood come through, and that's okay, guys. Okay, so remember it's still a little bit greasy from the candle wax. Alright, we'll pop out this so we can get a flat area. I can sand it really good. Scrape it. And we'll pop out this one too. And there we go. And all where that candle was. And it's a little bit of a messy job, so definitely could be fun. Do something a little bit different. And if you scraped off too much or you don't like it, you can always touch it up with a little bit more paint in areas too. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. Donna also has these nice brushes to lay on the paint too for chalk painting. And definitely if you want to learn more about small furniture restoration, you can contact me. I'm certified to teach the full Redew, Donna Dewberry certified program. And this is one of the tricks that we will learn in that program. There's so many great faux finishes that you can do. And yeah, so we'll just clean off all this dust, set that aside, clean up our mess, and then I'm going to come back and show you the next process. Definitely messy. And you can always do this outside too, and then that way it won't be in your home. That's what I love about these silicone mats. You can also get them on the site, and it really helps to protect your table and your work area, and then you can just get rid of all this dust and rinse it off and clean it. Alright, so after we've done that, cleaned up a bit of the mess, I'm going to put down a towel down now. And then I've got myself some soapy hot water and one of these little scrubby pads. And I want to just soap it down. Alright, so we can get rid of that candle wax. Just to get rid of that. And that's what I said. I just put one coat on the back because I knew I wanted to put another coat in the back to clean it up. Alright, the second coat. And I got a little bit of bumpy areas. I know it's probably candle wax or a little bit of salt. So I'm just doing a quick wash down here, just to get rid of some of that slime. And that's what I love about the Dawn soap. And I would get like the platinum 4-time stronger grease cleaning. Right, and that's going to help get rid of that residue. Okay. You can see some of the lighter colors coming through that I used. Okay. And then we're going to grab a rag and just dry it off. Right? You don't want to be putting it in the sink, guys. You want to do this so the wood doesn't get all soaked and too wet. Okay, wipe it off. Alright, so you can see some of the smaller little flecks from the salt. You can see some bigger ones from the onion bits, right? So the paint was still wet. Some of it got chipped out with the scraper. Alright, gives you a really nice look. Okay, and then now I want to take a sanding block and just give it another smooth little surface. Right, make sure that we have all those bits scraped off. Alright, I'm just doing it with a very fine one right now. Just a light smooth. And you can feel a little bit of the greasiness from the candle still. And that's why I love these old nail files, because they really help get you in some of those corners a bit better. Okay. Now I can come around the edges a little bit more with something stronger. Give it a little bit more distressing. And I want to bring in some of those brown tones from the old wood. I can go to the dollar store and pick up some really cheap nail files. And they may not be the greatest for your hands, but they definitely work great for small projects. Okay, get rid of all those chunks. Right, and then that sanding will help get rid of more of that candle wax. I'm really loving this piece. Pop in one of our forks here. Right, make sure we can get them still through. No thick paint down there. And it looks like I'm gonna have to do a touch-up coat. That's okay. I'd rather make sure that they have lots of space in there. So when we finish these, we know that we can slide them in nice. Right. Maybe you found yourself a knife block, or maybe a cup holder, or any little shelf. Right, you can definitely do this technique to anything. Okay, so I'm going to take my soapy sponge again and give it another little scrub. Right, and you might even have to let this dry and see how you feel, and get some clean water and a clean sponge and do this again to make sure that you get all that candle wax film. And that's why I like using the multi-surface too. It's a lot more durable, especially if you've given it overnight to dry, because then it starts curing after 24 hours. Right? That's good and soapy. And then I'm going to take a clean rag and wipe off more of that residue. And let it dry for, you know, a good 20 minutes, half an hour at least. And then you're ready to go. I'm going to take our little nibbies and file them a little bit more. It's hard to hold on to these guys. I just want to get us some heavier blue areas. Put them right back in. Oops. There. Alright, so this light buff, guys, this file has two sides to it, so it's got the hard file and the soft buffer file. Right, so you can definitely use any kind of old buffer. I've got a bunch of them. Or you can buy the buffer blocks. Okay, so it's nice and soft. And then we can touch up, put another coat on our handles here. And clean up the back. Okay, so when I'm going off the edge of the back, I always want to go out. You don't want to come in because you'll end up with a really thick amount of paint on your edge. So you always want to go out, out, out. Get a nice clean back. Work your way from the top. On the sides. And we can go up and down again. And the thing about chalk paint is it always looks lighter when it's wet, but it usually will darken a bit as it dries. Out. Get a nice clean edge. And you don't have to tape it, as long as you're going out, out, out. All around the whole edge. Always pick up your brush and out, out, out. And then you can sign the back and date it. Date before you add a sealer of choice. And there's lots of different varieties of ways of finishing this color now. So we let that dry. And I gotta fix this messy thing I made here by testing. Alright, so we'll let that dry really good. Okay, so you can see that it's not so shiny anymore, but I would definitely let that cool down a little bit and dry just a bit more before I flip it around. Okay. Definitely I'm feeling the underside here, how it feels. Does it feel greasy? Does it need one more bath? Right, so definitely you don't want to be adding sealer. I can feel actually a little bit more grease still on the bottom here, so I'll definitely let this dry and I'll give it one more bath. Right, my sponge has probably got a film of candle wax in it. I always cut them in half and make them little smaller ones so I can throw them away. Right, just your kitchen sponge. Right, so I'm going to come back when this is dry and then keep adding. Okay, so if you get any paint on your wood, definitely just take a little nail file and remove any paint from your dirty fingers, or right, just file it away. And then I was deciding, you know, maybe I'll start with the middle one and just do one to make it look a little bit different. Right, so I want to try and use similar colors, right, that I was playing around with. So I'm going to pull out some of my Prussian blue and white, and we're going to play around with a little bit of aqua or Cayman blue or whatever color you like. Right, I'm just looking at the Cayman blue because it's almost the same tone. Right, but we're going to create a little bit of a blue anyways, so it stands out on this blue. Just wanted to complement. And if you need a little tiny bit of moisture, guys, then you can always pop in a little bit of floating medium on the side, just in case you need it. And, or even cobalt would be a nice color to pop in. Okay, so I'm going to put all our colors on the plate like this. And then I like to tap it down, make sure it's a nice consistency. If it flattens out for you nice, you'll know that it's a perfect consistency. You'll see my Prussian blue definitely stayed up a little bit higher. It's one of my older bottles, and it's a little bit thicker. So sometimes you definitely do need to kind of play with your paints a little bit. If you feel like it's just a little bit too thick for you, then take a little bit of this floating medium, right? Because sometimes we do work with older paints. And I'm going to make this now the consistency I'm looking for. I just did half of it. I didn't do the whole puddle, right? So just brought a little bit over, dipped it in my floating medium a couple times, just enough to say that I'm watering that down just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to get our number 6 out, guys. Doing tiny little roses here. Okay, so I'm going to start off at the top, scatter them around, and then leave some spaces here so that I can pop in a little bit more brighter, like a leaf look. Okay, so when we're doing our side loading or any kind of loading with tiny little brushes, especially a 6, I like to go side to side. Okay, so we're going to get that white in there, soften it a little bit with this other blue, right? So if it gets a little bit dirty, it won't get too dark. Right? We still want a little bit of clean white on the edge, but definitely soften down. Right? So 3/4 of your brush has definitely got that blue in there, and then you can come in and side load just that little tiny bit of Prussian for a darker color. Okay, so I'm just trying to do like little easy rosebuds. Right, so if you have any problem with your stroke work, guys, with your tiny brushes, I have a full program to help you with that. Okay, so you can tip a little bit or tip a little bit in the back, work it in 1 or 2 times. Right, go over it again until you're happy. I definitely don't want too much white. I want to have my gradient up, so I'm trying to get that a little bit more dirty. Okay, and then you can come around and put all your back petals in if you want. Okay, I want it just to be a little bit darker at the base. Spread them around. Right, once your brush is really good and loaded, then you can definitely pick one side, right, to work with. I'm going to come around and do a bunch of little roses. Okay, and then you can come around and close them. Gentle pressure. If you're a nail tech like I am, we did a lot of work on these round surfaces, so you gotta kind of almost turn the handle of the wooden spoon or whatever you're painting on if you're doing a big stroke. Right. Make sure you're happy with each one. Right. See what colors you want to play with. Maybe you're more pink and purple girl. You definitely, do whatever colors you want and then try to complement it with a monochromatic style. Okay, so again, I want to leave some space. Right, brick layer them a little bit. I don't want all of that background hidden. Okay, we can definitely make these a little bit different. Right, spread them around. A little bit different angles. Don't want this too dark. And then if I want it a little bit darker, I can always go side load. Okay. Okay, so like I said, I'm trying to build these up a little bit slowly. Alright, multitask. Add another little side petal to it. Right, when you're making roses this tiny, guys, you definitely gotta cheat sometimes a little bit, right? So, oops, upside down. And not get so detailed. Try to open them up a little bit more space. Change sides. Right, sometimes I will go over that front bit. Try and get a little closer for you guys. The same strokes that we're doing with just a small little brush. I don't want this blue to be too dark. I'd rather have the dirty white with the lighter blue, and then backload a little tiny bit. Okay, so depends on the space you have. Tiny little dolphin noses. Alright, same pressure, guys. The chalk paint is also a little drier. Almost like paper. Alright. So this is why I was saying, try to do, your starts a few in a row so that way you can stay consistent. Right, once you've done a couple, make a plan. You know how much space you need. Right, so now we're just going to work our way down. My paint is really nice. I really don't need any medium, but I preloaded that area so then that way I don't have to. Okay. Go over that back pedal if you need to. Slow down. Let that paint absorb. Move myself down. Right? When you have this many roses, you're not going to see if one's not totally the same, but definitely try to have a little bit of a pattern going on. Right? So kind of going up. Move that down. Right? As long as your back petal is a little bit darker, and then you have that little bit more white on the edge, then your rose will be a lot more brighter. Right, and have it a little bit darker in the back. And then I'm working down as much as I can. Getting harder to hold on to this. Change myself here. And I'm going to lean myself a little bit on something so I can use my pinky as a fulcrum finger, right? Because before I was doing it on my own hand. So you can blow dry this and hold it from the bottom again. Sneak a little one in there. Maybe you prefer to work this way. You can definitely try and do all of it this way, but it's a little bit slippy. So again, now I need a little bit brighter. I might even tip sometimes. Right, because usually I have to lean somewhere. Right? So make sure it's dry. Where you're going to lean. Same thing. Now take a look at your stroke, guys. Make sure you're looking. You know, my white was fine. I just didn't have enough blue behind it. Oops. Fingers don't want to work anymore. That's why I'm not in the beauty industry anymore. But at least this customer is staying still for me a little bit more. It real person. But this is about the same size that I would do for nail art. So this is a great way to practice, guys, too, if you are nail artists taking this course. Get yourself some wooden spoons and decorate them. I've been painting a while, so definitely my brush might be getting a little bit dry or even gloopy, right? So don't worry about that, just wipe it out. Add the smallest amount of floating medium in, wake up this pile here that's starting to dry. Add some fresh paint. Add some more white. Just the smallest amounts, guys. Alright, come over and tip. And back, pick up a little bit of dark. Alright, get yourself back focused again every once in a while. Especially doing this many. Okay, so should be dry up here now. So if you went to the right, you know, it's easier to add just one if you want to add. If you can get one in there. Right, try not to be too gloopy. Right, should be able to still touch up this center. Right, you're not really touching it. Oops. Make sure your gradient is up there. Trying real hard not to lean on some of this that's still wet down here, right? Oops, hopefully you guys can see really good. At least a few of these, and then it's just repetitive, right? Grabbing the edge of the back pedal. Oops, I didn't grab any white and back wiped. Okay. You see, I just keep going over it until I'm happy. If you got room, definitely add more. Okay, I think that's enough roses there. And I just found myself a glass so I can put it in something smaller to let that dry. Alright, and then we can clean our brush and add some leaf color. I think I want something a little bit brighter. So I am going to go in and put a little bit of thicket. And some citrus. And you can see you don't need a lot of paint, guys. Right? Sometimes our paint gets a little bit dirty. You can always skim off some of the top, or it gets dry on the top. Right? If you're playing for a long time, your paint's starting to dry on you. Okay, and we can take the blow dryer to our Okay, so I kind of goofed up there and I forgot to hit record for finishing this one, so they're kind of forcing me to do all three now. Alright, so here we were at the leaves area here. Multi-loading. Make sure when you're washing your brushes, guys, don't leave them drowning in your bucket. Especially these little guys, make sure they're really good and dry. And so I'm just lightening up this citrus just a little bit with some white. I don't want it to have really a white edge. So what I'm doing here is I'm going in the big spaces and adding some one-stroke leaves. Right. And little details. So it's good that I got to play on this one and try to figure out what I was going to do. Right. Flat up to the point. Practice on some wax paper with your little tiny brushes. You don't have to put too much pressure on them. I'm trying to keep this a little bit more flatter for you guys so you can see. And wherever you got some big spaces, put some of these leaves. Work that white in really good. I'm going to put one here. And get a little brush. And just erase what you don't like. And turn it just slightly as you're creating the stroke to help you get around that curve. My fingers won't hold on to it. There we go. And see if I have any other really big spots. Just the biggest spots, guys. Put one right there. Okay, and then just at the base of all your roses, just tiny little ticks. Okay, just at the base of them. Even if you have a big space, you can even put one to the side. You start at the top, work your way down. And every once in a while, you gotta really push down on your brush to really add the moisture throughout the whole brush, right? So then that way it has more movement, right? So if it's not moist all the way through, it won't move, right? So you definitely want to have a nice flat chisel coming in, getting these tiny little chisel strokes, right? Keep coming back, flatten out your brush. I'm trying to do all the ones so I don't have to turn too much. Start at the top, make sure that I got everything. I make them all different sizes. Some a little bit fatter, some a little tiny. Right, they're all gonna make the roses look a little bit different. If you got a big space, then definitely add one to the side. But remember, we're gonna add some dots still too. Right, so you still need to keep that little bit of spaces, and you don't want 100% coverage of the background color. Right, we still want to see that. Right, so I'll go take a look and make sure you got them all. Sure you're not gloopy. And just little touches, tiny little touches. It just adds a little bit more interest, not being all leaves, and way easier to do, right? Okay, so just making sure that I didn't forget any. Okay, and then we're going to use like a little barbecue stick or a little toothpick. Okay, and here you want to add a little bit of water to your paint. Make sure it's a little bit runny, not like inky, just so it's not so thick. Even if it was fresh out of the bottle, guys, I would still add a little tiny bit of water. And you can see where I was dip dotting to test the size of them, right? So just little tiny ones with a toothpick. And don't go in too deep of paint. And then right at the base of some of these leaves, you can add a couple little dots or in an empty spot. Right, here's an empty spot. So mostly I'm doing like little triangle movements. Right here and there. I can't lean on my paint or I'm going to be falling for sure. Okay, slowly work your way down. And that'll add some nice interest to pop up. Right, so nobody's going to be looking at any particular spot. They're just going to look at it all going, wow, that's tiny. Okay, so they should just be here and there. You can miss some spots. Right, if it's that big of a spot, then maybe you should have put another leaf there. Right, so that's pretty good. And then I'm just using a glass this time that's shorter than my painting. Right, so that I can let that sit and dry. Okay, guys. And then repeat it one more time. Right, or as many times as you like, how many you want. If they're all separate, maybe you want to make them all different colors, right? And then put them in a nice dish of your own to use. And like I said, I am making these so that we can still use them. The wooden part is still not have any chemical coating on it at all. Okay, so it's still usable, and just the handle is going to be painted. Right, so hopefully when you're stirring and cooking, you're not going to be going any higher than that. So if you want, go down a little bit lower if you feel like you're going to be stirring something deep with it. But I just followed the original path of the old color and carry on with that. Okay, guys. So what I also thought to make this a little bit brighter too is I want to grab my liner brush. Okay, so I want to pick up some of this white that we've diluted from the dots. Okay, practice your stripes. Right, see if you can get really nice straight thin lines. And then right at the very top here, right, make sure you don't have too much paint. I'd rather go over it twice and make it a little bit thicker if I had to. So I just want to put a little bit of a stripe at the very top. And just to finish it off a little bit. And so we let that dry in our glass. And so make sure these dots are really good and dry, guys, before you start handling them. Alright, this one I'm going to just try and do upside down. Holding on to the handle. Little bits at a time, keep turning. And I'm all excited and I'm shaking. There we go. So I've got one little spot here of too thick. I could always just go in with a tiny little bit of my chalk paint and neaten that part up a little bit. Right. There. I know I'm being fussy there. Okay, guys, so there's two. And definitely I'm going to do the third one. Or you can, you know, if you really like, you can even keep the plain one in the middle, different color. But my fork is definitely going to sit in the middle of the two, so I'm going to have to do this third one here now. I thought I would just pop this up a little bit differently. And where I put the white, I think I'm going to put a little bit of silver. You see how that's strung there? So be careful with these treasure golds. Because they definitely sometimes will string when you pick it up. And now that we have this white down, this little stripe here might be a little bit more shiny and brighter. Trying to do this quick here, but take your time, guys. Right. Let them dry. A little bit more silver, and we could have put the dots in silver too if you really wanted to, but I thought this would be fine. A little bit brighter. And then if you want to add a stain over them, then those white dots will definitely be dulled down. So guys, hope you have fun with this project. And just think about your favorite colors, your home decor. Maybe it's for a gift for somebody. And they might prefer a little brighter colors, like I said, pinks, reds, yellows. But I thought I would do them. Alrighty, so we're ready to seal and finish our last little details of our project here. My fun spoon rack, and definitely there's lots of choices, guys. Through the Redew certification, we got a load of a kit. It was so amazing. We got so many different chalk paints and different types of waxes and stains in our kit. That one's very well used. And part of the assignments were also to get to know all these colors. So we use some door hangers, and any piece of wood will do. So if you get a variety of different chalk paints and stains and you want to test it, just try to find a piece of scrap wood somewhere, similar to what you've been working on, and practice on it. And then if you feel happy with that combination, then go ahead and do it on your project, right? So definitely there is some choices of that, and this is part of the Redew. When I go out and do a customer quote and they show me a piece of furniture, I can show them a bunch of different swatches of all the colors that I can get or have in stock, and then also they have examples of how they've been finished, right? So on this side I played around with different water-based sealer stains on top of this original color, right? So this is what we used on the background, this nautical color, and so you can see that I have a couple different ones, and some of them might not even be available anymore through folk art through the years, and some they're still good. They're really liquidy, and they're supposed to be liquidy, right? So definitely I still playing around with some of them, like mahoganies, and this one's more like barn board, right? So it really just depends on what colors you like to play around with. And so with my little example boards here that I have the same color on both sides, and then on this side I have the wax finishes. So these are also options to finish your wood items, but when you're using it like a countertop, you definitely want something a little bit stronger for a sealer. But if it's a decorative item and you just want to add a finish to seal in that chalk paint, we did use multi-surface over here and chalk paint over here. So over here, if you really scrubbed hard with a washcloth and soap, you probably would take off the paint. So with the wax, it does give it an extra little protection layer. And then there's a couple different choices of that. So there's a clear, and then there's the antiquing one, right? And then there's water-based ones, but these are basically just like paint, guys, right? So you still would have to put a clear sealer on top of this. So these are stains and different finishes that you can do to tint, what you've done, right? And definitely it'll still adhere to the multi-surface a little bit too as well. Right, so that's the nice thing about playing with different styles of paint together, like a multimedia type of piece. So with this project, definitely having the wood handles here painted, I want to protect them a little bit more because I might have to go and wash these, right? I'm going to be using them for cooking and stuff like that, or stirring a salad or whatever, picking up some pasta. Definitely I still want to be able to use these. So I'm going to be showing you a couple different varieties of finishing in this project. I thought this was a great example to be able to show you all the different styles and ways of doing things, and what can you do differently on a piece of wood that you are definitely going to to eat with, right? So technically, if we were painting on a glass or any item, like I said, wherever is going to touch food or your mouth, you definitely don't want to paint on those areas, right? But the handles are definitely okay to do that. Right, so hopefully you're gonna not use this that often, you know, wear and tear, and or enjoy it, right? So if worst comes to worst, you as the artist, they're yours. What do? You just sand them down and paint something else. Maybe you change your mind, change your color decor. You know, it's not a problem. These are so cheap, you can probably get more spoons somewhere, right? So as long as you have this kind of holder, and I do believe somebody made this themselves at home. It wasn't an item that was bought at Walmart or anything like that. Definitely is just a piece of pine board, and somebody was pretty crafty with their you know, putting the pieces together and designing an idea. Okay, so yeah, definitely it's a fun piece to have in your kitchen. And we're going to play around, like I said, with a couple different ways of doing it, and definitely with timing of drying and stuff like that. I want to definitely get a little bit of staining done on this one here too. Okay, so with the look of it, if you go too heavy, like the examples were done very heavy, I applied the product quite heavy, so you can see that this is like a blue-brown now. So it's kind of changed its color completely, right? So I don't want to change it that much. So if you dilute it, right, you're going to have to add water to make it a little bit more softer, so it's not going to actually make my white dirty looking, right? So we definitely need to pick which one. And definitely, because of the fact that I'm multitasking a class for you guys to teach you and show you the differences, I want to pick something that's very similar in color, right? So the antiquing wax and the walnut wood tint is definitely both water-based, and they're very similar. Like, they're both walnut kind of colors, right? So I don't want to do the mahogany because it won't match, right? So with the wax, there's definitely a clear wax, right? So we're going to play around with a couple different ways here. Actually, I'm going to use the wax on this, and then I'm going to use the wood tints on the handles. All right, so I want to play around with it, but I don't want it to get too dark. Okay, so what I like using for wax when I do big furniture pieces, if you guys saw my profile with Miss Jackie that I did, big huge china cabinet, you know, I definitely played around with a lot of different faux finishes with smaller items too. I did a mini version, little knick-knack cabinets, you know, lots of different things that we can do and spruce up and find at the thrift store and make your home the way you want it, right? Okay, so what I really like is these dish rags. I have an old one that I wipe off my brush on and stuff like that. But these are definitely really good for also applying and removing some of the wax. Alright, so this is going to be done with a dry rag and just the product out the way it is out of the bottle. Okay, and then you're also going to keep some of it so that you can rub some away. Right, so you're going to apply it and then wax on, wax off. You know, like the, the movie there. So what I thought I would do, I'm going to take these little buttons out, and I want to have it a little bit darker. Right, so I'm going to come over and pick up a little bit of this dark wax, and where I want it to be darker is definitely around in the creases here. This is where, you know, maybe more dust and dirt would settle. Right, so you see how much that darkened things already. Right, so definitely I don't want it to be too dark, guys. And we've already added a little bit, so if you don't have this and you just want to go ahead and use a clear sealer over yours, then definitely you could always pop in a little bit more brown in your white, right? So we're playing around with that on top of the candle wax. Remember, we didn't know what was going to end up showing after. We kind of lost placement, and maybe didn't realize that some areas that you put dark are now gone. You know what I mean? So this is just the layering of the product, so then that way you have control of where you want that look to be. Okay, so definitely underneath, I'm going to put a bunch more. Right, add a little extra shadow under there. Down the sides a little bit, right on top of my wood, because that helps to seal the wood too, right? And where the areas that we sanded it down to the original wood, right? That wax is also going to, the wood is going to accept that wax as well. Okay, so again, I want to add just a little bit more, and definitely down in this little hole here. All right, let's make that a little bit darker. Okay, and if you leave it there, let it dry a little bit, right? You put it on heavier and let it dry, it's going to stay darker. Right. So, like I said, I'm just selecting where I want it to be dark. All right, we'll put a little bit of dirtiness on here. Okay, maybe around the sides a little bit more. And I'm skimping it, guys, right? So there's still some whiter areas and some darker areas. And especially where there's the blue, right? I definitely want to add some of that stain on it, so it's going to darken that blue even more. Right? But it's okay to have little brighter, lighter areas. So just rubbing it in. There's hardly anything left now, because I really want a very light application. I just want to stain very, very lightly, right? But it still doesn't have enough wax to protect. Okay, so this is where I like to go in with another clean side here and remove the excess now. Make sure that it's all penetrated. It's not moving. See, some of it's actually being removed here where I had it a little bit heavy. Okay. I want to dry all that dark wax. And remove any excess. Right, and then if you felt like you still wanted it darker, you could always come in with a little bit of a brush and come in and paint a little bit more with it and really let it dry. Right, just bringing in just a little bit more depth in places if you really wanted to. Okay, so that's another way of applying it into certain areas, but mostly you're going to just use a rag. Okay, so then you want to find a nice clean spot and use clear now. And clear, you can put it on pretty heavy, right? Because you're not going to see it. The clear now is really going to help make sure that all that chalk paint is got a good coating of protection. Okay. You can dilute some of the two colors together if you wanted some of that walnut to be even lighter. You can always multitask it that way. But definitely, I like playing around with it separate, so then that way I can control still having some lighter areas. Okay, just playing with the two colors like that. And then take a dry rag. Let this sit for about a minute. It does say, let's see what the instruction says if you don't have the product. Let dry overnight and then buff to desire, right? So we're technically not supposed to remove a lot, right? You can leave it on and let it dry. And this little tiny bit doesn't take long. And then if it looks a little greasy, wet, right? Tomorrow, whatever doesn't absorb, this is what you're going to buff off with one of these. Okay. So it's pretty protected, right? So again, with this dark blue, right, we want to match that dark stain. I'm just looking for my old spot that I started on my rag. And this I can actually put on, you know, a little bit more heavy if I want. Right? Nobody's going to see the back, really. Just playing just because I can. Right? We can give this a unique look. And you'll just for learning purposes too. Right? You can see how dark some of these areas are. It almost looks black. Right? So you guys can see how much it darkens this blue. So if you're happy with this blue, don't put any stain on it. Okay? So then I'm going to come in and pick up the rest of this clear, and I'm going to hit that with... Okay, so you can also just pour it a little bit at a time on your cloth. Alright, and it's going to start picking up some of that walnut too. Alright, so that's why I like to buff off a little bit of that walnut and then put more clear on top of it. It softens out those lines a little bit, but where it was really dry, it accepted it really well. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry for a while there, and so they usually say the next day, and then they'll come over with this clean, dry buffing cloth, and you'll see that it'll come all nice and shiny for you. Okay, put a little clear on my buttons. Okay, so I'll just set this aside to do its thing. And it's ready to put on the wall tomorrow. Okay, so these guys I want to do a little bit differently. Okay, so we're going to use the water-based finish stain. And it's pretty liquidy. You can actually probably shake this one. But definitely doesn't hurt to give it a stir too, because then all those bubbles get in there, but it's not a big deal. Right? And just test the bottom to make sure that there's not a lot of anything starting to solidify at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to pour a little bit over here. Don't need much, they're only tiny little handles. Wipe my lid. Okay, and we can use any brush. So what I want to do is actually add some water to this, guys. Okay, so water it down a little bit at a time. You don't need much, like I said. Right? So you see the difference on my plate. And if I pull some of this out, it's so much more concentrated, right? So that's why I only did a little bit at a time. So I want to just test this and see how I like it. Right? And I like the color. See, if you go too dark, it's going to cover everything, right? So you want to put it on and wipe it off. And it's just going to deepen everything, make it aged a little bit more. Right? So we're going to paint down the whole handle with this stain. Right, give it a few seconds to absorb a little bit. Right? See how you like it. So you're just doing the handle part, not the wood. Alright, we're going to treat the other side a little bit differently. Okay, so we're going to let that sit in our glass. And by the time I'm doing 3 of them, I'm looking for a happy medium. It's almost too watery, so I'm just trying to add just a little bit more of the concentrated. Give this a little bit of antiquing. My fingers are so done. Oops. Okay. Try to do this a little bit quick. Alright, as soon as you see that it's too dark, definitely go and grab more water, right? So you can always thin it down while you're applying it. Right, depending on if you feel like it's going to get too dark on you. Alright, so this one I went a little bit lighter. You can always go a tiny bit darker. Okay, so once it's done drying a little bit, just wipe off the excess. Right. I'm not wiping very hard. Right, but you see the difference. How dark it was before I wiped. And it's still kind of wet, but it's absorbing, especially in the chalk paint. Right, it's going to definitely deepen that blue, but I didn't want it to darken my roses. Okay, so we're going to let that dry, just, you know, about maybe half an hour or so. Put it back in the cup. Alright, so it dries nice. And then in about 20 minutes, half an hour, you don't have to wait too long because everything is all set overnight. Then we can add some outdoor sealer. Okay, so I do like this one. It definitely is quite durable. It says it's got a matte finish, but it still has, to me, like a bit of a semi-gloss. It's not as matte as some of the companies. So I want a little bit of a shine because in my theory of knowledge of things that I've ever done, the higher the shine, the more durable the finish will be. Right, so matte definitely has less durability, but like I said, there is like a semi-gloss, and you'll see in the finish, right? So it still looks pretty chalky. So definitely this will pop it up a little bit more, and definitely with something like this, take your time, guys, and do 3 coats. Right, I'm just going to show you one, but I'll let it dry for. Again, look at the recommendations, what it says. It says wait 30 minutes in between coats. Right, and you're not going to put it on very thick. So the thinner coats you do, I'd rather do 4 thin coats than try to get 2 thick coats on. Right, you're going to get a much nicer finish. And plus, when we put these upside down again, you don't want anything dripping down on you. Okay, so just a little heads up of that while that's drying. And then we'll come back in about 20 minutes of internet time. I'll see you in the next part, and we'll quickly show you how I'm going to finish these now. Okay, so we're ready to add some sealer to this. And what you could have done too was put a little tape on the edge here where you don't want to go over before you started painting. And that would have given you a nice clean edge too. But definitely I don't want any sealer dripping down onto my wooded area that I want to keep for good. Okay, so if you want, play around with some other tape here a little bit more. I just wanted a small piece to get around the edge, and then, you know, you can definitely use bigger pieces. a little bit lower just to keep this all from dripping down, just in case. Because we are going to put it in a cup to let it dry. Right? We'll get a nice clean edge this way. Little bit of a curve. Okay. Want it to fit right around, nice and straight. I don't care about the bottom part. Like I said, I've got some bigger tape here I can always use as well. A little bit lower. Oops. That doesn't need to be taped. Okay, so just quickly tape these up. And a little extra insurance. Alright, so that's protected. And then usually I have a designated brushes for sealer. I don't usually use my one-stroke brushes. Definitely do not use that. The whiter bristles definitely give you a nice light application, right? So if you have some old glass brushes that lost their chisel or really yucky, definitely this kind of material is better than the orange Teflon, right? And then also there's more like a sable look, right? The browner. This is the most stiffest, right? So definitely we want something really nice and soft, right? So I'm going to go ahead and use a bigger brush for this because this is my old sealer brush. I use it for bows. I clean it really well with soap and water is fine, right? Because I'm using water-based sealers. If you're using different, stronger Varathings, then definitely you need stronger solvents. And I try to stay away from any of those type of products just because I don't want to deal with all those odors, and the water-based ones are wonderful, right? And depending if you're putting it outside or not, right? Some of our crafts, right? So I just put a little bit down at a time. Of course the dry brush is going to absorb it all first time, and yeah, just go lightly around all of your handles. Quickly try not going over it too many times because it starts to dry fairly quickly, and then you'll get that brush stroke through it because it's starting to dry. So just like a quick glaze, right, all around all the edge. And we're going to wait half an hour, and go ahead. This is going to take me a couple of hours now because I want to put at least 3 coats on here. And then I'll come back later this afternoon, again in internet time, and show you how I'm going to treat the edible side. Okay. Just a quick thin coat. Nice smooth stroke so that it's nice and not globby. Alrighty, and then I'm going to put this brush in water until I come back in half an hour. Okay, so just like I said, only add a little bit at a time on your plate as needed. And if it does drip over, hopefully the tape will stop that. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Has absorbed into the wood and the paint. So now I'm just taking my microfilm type cloth here, and you say giving it a little bit of a buff. You can see that there's a little bit more shine popping up now. It really does buff things up nicely. Okay, so I'm going to put these little spots in here. Give them a bit of a buff. Right, and then put my screw in the wall. And then I'm going to put a cloth over these and give them a little bit of a hammer to get them in there a bit more. But I don't think we need to push them in too hard. That way if you ever need to move it, pop it back out. But if you feel like you need to, then I would try and protect it. Okay, nice and smooth now. Okay, so again, I did that for experimental, just to show you the different blues that you'll get with the stain. Alright, and these guys are nice and dry too. And what I want to put on there, I got a clean rag here, so I have no chemicals. And I'm going to use a little bit of mineral oil. Okay, so technically this, you put a teaspoon in your mouth if you have the occasional constipation. It's definitely food grade, guys, right? You can drink it. I ended up finding a bottle at work, and I thought, oh, perfect, I need some of that, because I used to use this on the cutting boards my dad used to make for me, so they don't crack. Alright, so I grew up with woodworking and all my life with my dad doing all kinds of neat stuff. He made my mom coffee tables and all kinds of things, cutting boards, banana hangers through the years. So definitely this is what he uses for all of his food grade wood crafts. Okay, so I'm going to put a good amount of oil there, maybe a bit more. Okay, so now that we have these dry, now if you need to add a little bit of moisture to these guys and a little bit more shine, sometimes they get dried out with use. Right, so I'm going to leave a really good layer of this, guys, on here and let it absorb as much as it wants. And then when it's good and dry, then it'll be a little bit more waterproof. Alright guys, so that's basically all I use on any cutting board that you maybe want to decorate a little bit around the corner of. Then you can definitely put this right over on top of your painted items, right? Even over the sealer area, it's not going to hurt it, right? Think about that you're cooking, right? So I'm going to get a good, nice look, freshen these guys up again. Right, and then you can do that to any of them that's in your utensils every once in a while, even though you didn't paint the handles. Definitely helps keep them a little bit more from cracking. Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna let that sit overnight now with all that oil on there. And then tomorrow I'll be able to hang this up on the side of my baker's rack. Thanks so much for joining me. If you have any other questions about restoring furniture or giving different faux finishes, different ways of aging, definitely all of these tips and tricks will be taught throughout the Redew certification program through Donna Dewberry. I'm a certified instructor. I'm now at my master level. It's the highest level you can get. I'm so honored to achieve, and definitely lots of years of different ways of doing things and playing and incorporating all those ideas into some of my newer projects today. Happy creating!